Hey everybody, my name's Nathaniel. I'm an indie game developer working on my fourth game. And I'm not the only one. There are plenty of indie game developers out there who are entering the scene, making some great projects, and I want to highlight those people. I want to hear what those people think, and I want to get their advice on someone else coming into the industry. How should they join? How should they learn? And other things like that. If you're interested, please listen along. I have Gabriel, who's working on Stellar Turbinus. He's been pretty hard at work for the last 7 years to get this project through. One of those rare situations where they sat down to work on the project and they didn't stray. It's a good conversation. I hope you stick around to listen. And if you have any interest in this type of format, please subscribe and follow and all that good jazz. All right. That's it. Yeah, thanks for sitting down with me and having the conversation. I just wanted to start putting together just a few little interviews just about starting. There's a lot of indie game developers out there. There's a lot of people wanting to join the space, and from, you look at the expensive ass Switch 2 games coming out and everyone complaining like that. I do believe that we're looking at a time where indie games are going to basically come back up because nobody has $90 to drop on a game these days, but they do have 19. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, no, exactly. And I think with how easy it is to get your game kind of up and running on various platforms on PC, it's definitely a great time to be an indie developer.
Yeah, 100%. So just to start you off, easy one. What was the first video game you ever played?
Oh no, it's not an easy one at all. Okay, hold on, really have to think. Probably maybe like Snake on my Nokia phone, or maybe even like the original Donkey Kong arcade game or something like that. I don't know. It's been a very long time. I've been a gamer for as long as I can remember, really. So it'll be something like that.
It's the first one. Maybe I should change the question to the first one you remember, because you can't nail down.
Well, I don't know, because then even then, like the first one you remember is kind of like, okay, I have to go back through my memories to figure out which one was even the first one I did remember. Well, I mean, you're not going to name something you can't remember, so I don't know.
Yeah, I completely understand. All right, so just as a thing, what was kind of like that catalyst that got you into game development? You've been working on Stellar Terminus now for how many years?
I think it's been about 7 years on and off now, which is quite a long time. In terms of catalyst, man, I don't know. I really think I'm like a weird case, because I remember back in high school, me and my friends used to always talk about like games and stuff, and we'd always be like, oh, if I could make a game, I'd put this in it, or I'd do this, or something like that. And it never really clicked for me that I could actually make games until kind of later on. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. Later on, during uni, I was doing programming for the experiments that I was running, and just one day I kind of put two and two together that, hey, I can program. Hey, I like video games.
Yeah.
I can program video games. I could just start.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess you kind of had the skills kind of coming up, so you were like, hey, I can actually start to use these. So that kind of makes sense. So you had training through university, not directly for video games, but you did start get your programming beginnings basically all put through university.
I didn't actually study programming at university.
Oh, okay.
Psychology. I was self-taught and kind of thrown into the deep end when my supervisor was like, here, you can run these experiments. Here's some code I've written. You can adapt it for your own experiments. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll try.
Yeah.
And that's kind of just how it started. I kind of had the skills of knowing how to look stuff up and what to look stuff up from doing uni stuff and research, and kind of just applied it to programming. And I think one of the things that everyone says as a programmer is 50% of programming is knowing what to look up and Googling. So yeah, it was kind of a natural fit, I suppose.
So you kind of were thrown in the. I think with a lot of things, especially with programming. I think that the best way you can learn is by throwing yourself in the deep end, and the reason programmers are there are to solve problems they don't know how to solve. So I
Yes,
think
yes.
you're gonna always build little quivers in your repertoire when you're exposing yourself to issues you don't know how to use. That hill for me at the moment is shaders. I shaders to me are just this voodoo magic that I don't want to touch. But you look at some of the amazing stuff online, and
Oh
it's
my
all
God, I
shader.
know.
It's all shader based. So I've
Exactly.
kind of had to get the goat and start the sacrifice and the blood on the wall and everything to get shaders. But you know, it used to be, physical collision. It used to be like recursive grid checks. It used to
Hmm,
be
hmm.
things, and for me at least. And it sounds like with your experiments and everything back in university, you've kind
Yep.
of been like, I need a solution. Let me build on this, and then you've been able to use that tech you've kind of put together to be like, oh, okay, I can do this now. I can do this now,
Yes.
and just
Yes,
slowly
exactly
build
right.
yourself up. Yeah.
I mean,
Um.
that's programming in a nutshell, like you just slowly break the problem down bit by bit. You develop one thing. When you're happy with that, then you can move on to the next thing, and each step is kind of like another layer in your code that you can then build upon and yeah, do go on to bigger and better things.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Hmm.
So I guess for my next question is, how would you recommend others to get into the hobby?
Yeah, okay. So like I said, I think me getting into it was a bit of an outlier. I would say that probably for other people starting off, I think there's different levels that you can come in at. If you're like not familiar with programming at all, I'd probably recommend starting with something like Python. I think that's a very like nice language to pick up because it's popular, it's easy to understand, so you can get a lot of tutorials for it. And then kind of once you have the logic down, and the I suppose the basics of what a program is, what it does, um, you can then probably move on to some kind of some kind of engine. I haven't this. I think part of the reason why I'm having trouble answering the question, I suppose, is because there are a lot of game engines out there, and a lot of them are really good, but none of them are like the perfect. There's no perfect engine, if you know
Yeah,
what I
of
mean.
course, of course.
There's no perfect entry point, and I would say that it really depends on what your interest in, where your interests lie, I suppose. Like, so if you are kind of more interested in 2D stuff or 3D stuff, web um, game development versus something that you download and run on your own computer. Uh, yeah, there's a bunch of different entry points. If I'm pressed for an answer, I'm going to say Game Maker because that's the language I'm currently using, and
Yeah,
I find it
that's your
quite
bread and
easy
butter.
to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. There are a few tutorials out there, not definitely not as many as some of the bigger languages, so it's not as um, used, I suppose, in terms of that. But you know, that being said, there are a lot of like famous games made with the GameMake engine.
Yeah.
Obviously, the biggest one's going to be Undertale.
100%. Yeah.
There's so much documentation for Undertale, and people have made their own mods and stuff like that. Um, it's kind of a good place to start if you want to. But it's really um, as simple as finding a nice beginner tutorial, following along
Yeah.
with it,
Yeah.
and then at each stage when that kind of portion of the tutorial ends, think to yourself like, okay, this is what I've learned. Can I do something else with what I've learned that hasn't explicitly been said in the tutorial? Like, can I make my character move twice as fast or jump twice as high? Or, I want to add, two characters that I want to control at the same time, something like that. And it kind of, as you play around with the code, you get more familiar with it. You kind of understand it rather than just kind of rote copying it down. And yeah, that's how the learning happens.
Yeah. Yeah. No, completely, 100%.
Hmm.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a tweak to the second question just from the answer.
Yes.
How did you start developing games? And from the way that you started learning, is there anything you wish you did differently? If you could go back in time, and obviously this is
Oh,
the loaded question, like if you could go back in time, you could stop everything. I'm going to stop Hitler. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to stop that. But if you could go back in time and basically act as a mentor for yourself and kind of
yes.
put yourself on the right thing and say, hey, maybe don't do this. Maybe focus on this. Maybe, hey, that's good. Keep doing that. Or hey, you're missing out on this. What would you go back and say?
Tough, tough questions. The hard questions, in fact. Um, okay, so how I started was, um, I am very, very familiar with uh, data structures. I think that's probably one of my strengths. And so when I was starting out my game, the first thing I did was a lot of back-end stuff, algorithmic stuff in terms of I have a 2D array, how am I going to make a maze in it? How am I going to get a person within that grid to run and bump into the walls and make sure it's staying within the bounds? Um, there was a lot of that work, and I had very crude graphics just so I could visualize what I was doing.
Yeah.
So that's how I started. It was not with like someone jumping around or, opening up paint and drawing a nice scene. It was purely just working with numbers and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um and data. And I totally understand that is not going to be how everyone approaches their game. Um, but it kind of I think the message here is that you probably want to play to your strengths in the beginning,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good.
because that'll give you, a strong foundation, and then from there you can use that as like a solid base, and then you can go on and learn the other things that you don't necessarily um, know or aren't as familiar with. So that's part one to your question. Second part, in terms of what would I do differently if I could go back in time and tell myself, keep doing this, not or don't do that. So from where I stand, and see, uh, I think probably the most difficult part about programming and becoming a game dev is not the programming, it's everything around it. So in terms of time management, scope management, um,
Yes.
all that sort of project sort of stuff. Um, and when I started, I had an awareness of this, and I was like, okay, keep the game small, keep it manageable, and understand the scope and go from there. And I think I was doing the right thing, but I didn't understand when I set out my scope, it looked small at first,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then implementing it was a whole different story. So, um, a lot of the stuff that I program, when I write my code, maybe this is getting too into the weeds, but I try to write it as um, flexibly as possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to take into account, oh, maybe I might need this in the future. I'll add this argument, or I want to account for not just one argument, but a whole array of arguments just in case I have multiple things that need to be done. And that completely overcomplicates the code base. And it stems from the fact that I thought my scope was defined early on, and now that I'm writing it, I can see that it is clearly not as defined as I thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's hard because obviously you don't know everything.
Yeah. Of
Um,
course.
when you first set out to program something, and so you kind of have to strike a balance, I suppose, between keeping your code flexible and modular, but not getting too into the weeds of I need to account for
Of
every single thing that.
hypotheticals and what happens
Yeah,
if they're underwater
exactly.
with a lightning bolt strapped to their back and in outer space. That you want to have it modular, but you don't want to go too down the what if path unless if it's already kind of defined.
Yeah, that's no, that's exactly right. Because as soon as you start doing that, then you're like, okay, well, I've potentially programmed all of these cases. Well, cool. Now I have to check all of these cases to make sure that what I've actually programmed actually takes that into account. Because if I don't, and I come back later and I'm like, hey, cool, I wrote this function. I'm going to chuck another argument into it, and it completely like explodes.
Yeah.
Then I'm back at square one where it's like, well, why did I program this if I didn't check this, or it's not working? It was supposed to help rather than add
Yeah.
additional time to my programming adventure.
I
So
I also like to point
yeah,
out like
yep,
your Also, again, another edge case, and I hate the word edge case, but you're a peculiar situation where you kind of, bit the large project, and then you held onto it, and you refused to let go. So you've been working on Stellar Terminus for like 7 years now, and a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm ready to do the big RPG," and then they're like, "Oh, oh, oh,"
Yeah.
and then they move to something smaller. But you've held on.
It wasn't supposed to be this big. And like when you look at the code base, it isn't really. It's just kind of, I don't know. It's bigger than I anticipated, I suppose. In the end, I kind of, again, this goes back to what I was saying before. I wanted it to be modular. So most of my code is database driven, where adding a new enemy is as simple as putting in another line into the database, and it'll read it in perfectly fine.
Yeah.
The problem is that when I want a unique attribute for that enemy, or it's going to have unique moves, then that's a whole bunch of assets that I need to draw up. It's another set of moves that I need to put into the database.
All the other
and it's a
enemies
whole other
need
round
to
of testing.
have that attribute set for them.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. So while it is quite easy to get that stuff up and running, and I think this is, I don't really think I don't know. I'd definitely simplify it if I could go back in time, but I like the sort of flexible approach that I've kind of given myself.
Sorry,
what was the question? What was it?
I guess what I was saying was you're one of the interesting side cases that
that's
you
right.
started your first project and then you kept going. A lot of people will start their first project, realize, oh, I mean, I'm in too deep, and I've got to try something else. But you just held on like a Rottweiler. You were like, I'm not letting go. I'm staying here.
Okay. Let me. I'll try not to sidetrack this time. The first thing is that I didn't think it would be that big. The second thing is I still don't think it's that big. I don't know. Yeah, I just
You're
don't,
juggling
I don't
it
have the
with a
experience.
full-time job and a career, and this is your personal time. It's not all of us have the small window of being able to dedicate 9 hours a day to it. It is a hobby, and for a lot of people, it is going to be hobbyist at the beginning. You're going to have to do small things after work for 3 hours and prioritize your time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, no, that's so. I just wanted to say, good on you for holding on. The finish line is hopefully in sight. I think you were mentioning
definitely
May or March. I think May. Actually, no, May or March was a bit early. So let's not say that.
I'd like to say by the end of this year, it'll be done. But we'll see how it goes, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, but that being said, it's totally not a bad thing to kind of realize that you've bitten off more than you can chew. Put the project to one side, start on something smaller. I think that's totally fine. That's how you learn.
That was how I was with Slam Burrows Climb and Slam Burrows itself. I was like, this is ballooned out of the scope. I need to kind of just get something out.
That being said, you did end up finishing it, which was excellent. But I think that self-reflection is a good skill to have, not just to get lost in the source.
Yeah.
To kind of think about what you're doing and making sure that you're still on the right track. You've still got sight of the big picture. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously your strength, from the sounds of it, is programming. In the wings for art and sound, how did you build up those skills? Was there anything you could recommend someone for, if they're kind of leaning out of their element when it comes to art or sound? Like, I don't think you're doing your own music. Is that right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Music for me is that one thing that I have two left feet. I don't understand. It's like that U.S. senator said. It's like porn. I know it when I see it. I'm like, if that's the song I want, I know it when I hear it. But past that, all I can do is send reference material and tap my feet. That's all I can do. I think back in school, I had a music assignment where we made a Christmas rap, and it was so bad. And I think that was the kind of the nail in the coffin for me for music. I was like, yeah, other people are gonna do this. I've made my own sound effects. I've made my own art. Music is the one thing that I'm like, yeah, no, not happening. no, I'm done.
Mm,
But in
yeah.
regards to art and sound,
Yes.
kind of two realms that they're not your right hand. It's not your dominant way
No, absolutely
game
not.
development. What I believe you've done a lot of your art yourself. Is that correct?
All done myself. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Well, it's definitely, it's definitely, Sorry.
It's one of the art styles of all time.
Yeah, it's
Is
one of the
how
art
I'd put
styles of all
it.
time. Yeah, no, you definitely made a style, and I can also say that you can see your limitations, and you've leaned into them
Yeah,
where
that's
you can
exactly
see
right.
like, hey, like not everyone can make these massive pieces of art. So what can we do? That's why one of the big things for I haven't announced the name yet, so I'm not going to say, but you know the name. That for the strategy
Yes.
game,
Yes.
it's a GBA theme. I'm trying to aim for that
Yes.
GBA. I'm trying to keep that pixel perfect kind of motif because
Mhm,
I can do
mhm.
20 pixels worth of art. I can't do
Yep.
1,000.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
just not in my DNA.
Mhm.
I can see that you're kind of in a similar boat where you're going for that old DOS
Yes.
style look where it's you're able to get a bit of a theming. It fits your theming. You even got found ways in story and gameplay to say, hey, this is why it's like this. You know,
Yes. Yes.
you're
That's right.
operating
That's right.
you're operating a machine that you're operating a suit that is basically
All
completely
tech.
all tech. You can't see anything. There's a reason
Yep.
for it.
Yep. Yep. That's right. That's right.
What would you do? What would you say to people who aren't strong in sound and art? How would you recommend them to go forward and kind of
Mm.
like pushing into that territory?
So, I think the one takeaway that's kind of become central to how I think about these things is that I don't care how ugly your art is. I don't care how bad your sound sounds. If things are consistent, everything will kind of come together
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
nice way. So as long as you keep things consistent, I think one trap that amateur game devs will fall into is they're like, oh, I'm going to have really high res backgrounds, and my character will be super nicely animated. But if they're not in the same resolution, or they're using different color schemes, or if the frame rate is different between the character and the enemy, it's just not going to gel together.
Yeah.
So my one suggestion is that when you're thinking about these things, when you're drawing up your assets, try and keep things as consistent as possible. So use the same
Yeah.
program, use the same dimensions, try and use the same colors, um, that sort of thing. I think beyond that, it's great if you can look at a game that you like and say, okay, uh, I like this game. What about it visually? Is it makes it consistent and makes it nice to look at? So in your case, you're taking inspiration from a GBA game. That
Yeah.
means a limited color
Yeah.
palette, limited resolution, also limited frame rate because it looks weird having
I
like
mean,
maybe a small pixelated character, but he's moving at 60 frames, but like there's 60
it
different
is
frames per
completely
second. So
uncapped. I've completely uncapped it, but I've had to do some magic to kind of snap all the pixels in place. I'm
yes.
very I don't want any mixels, so I've been very precise on the animations and it only stepping in full pixel steps and everything. But the whole thing is still in Delta time, which I'm very proud of.
Nice. That is excellent. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
coming back to GameMaker, it only runs in frames per second. So if you want to do delta time calculations, you kind of need to program that in your own. So that's
Oh
absolutely one
wow, I didn't
positive
know
for.
that.
Yeah, yeah. It's more
Yeah.
like I don't know. I suppose it's how like how consoles like I know Japanese developers are very like they tie their logic to frame count rather
Yeah.
than to delta time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's definitely one point in Godot's favor, and that's something that I'd like to play with in the future. But again, that's for a later time.
That's it. That's in later
Um,
time, yeah.
yes, yes. So yeah, I'm sorry. I suppose in terms of doing your own art, yeah, I would say keep it simple, keep the scope
Consistency
super
is
super
king.
limited
Yeah.
as first. Yep, and
Yeah.
consistency is key.
Yeah,
Absolutely. With
100%.
sound and music, man, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's definitely not my area of
Yeah. I
expertise.
completely understand, yeah.
I did do a couple of songs for one of the game jam projects that I was involved in, and
Hmm.
that was kind of fun to do just because it was refreshing, I suppose.
Yeah,
But
it's something new.
that
Yeah.
being, yeah, exactly. But that being said, I did learn piano when I was younger, so I kind
Oh,
of have a
okay.
little bit of that musical sense drilled into me, but
Hmm.
it's kind of yeah, again, it's not really like um how would I say it?
Something
Um
you've been able to like kind of develop throughout your time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. It's a
Okay,
bit,
fair
and
enough.
it's a bit more nebulous, kind of what you were saying before, where yeah, I can hear if it sounds good, but I don't necessarily
Yeah,
know how to make it sound good,
yeah, yeah.
or the steps towards that. Yeah, so I don't know. It's different, but I would say that it would be similar with programming, where you kind
Hmm.
of you say, okay, I want to pick a digital audio workspace, sorry,
Hmm.
workstation, DAW. I can't remember what they're called,
I
for
know what a
working
DAW. Sorry, I've heard DAW. Past that, I don't know. I don't know anything
in.
audio side.
But yeah, I'd say just choose one, find a nice beginner tutorial,
Hmm.
go from there.
Yeah.
The caveat I would put is that try not to learn everything at once. It's okay to have
Mm.
placeholder assets in your game if you just want something up and running for the sake of just seeing
Yeah.
how it is.
Yeah.
Don't try and do everything at once because yeah, you'll spread yourself too thin and
Hmm.
nothing will end up get done. Yeah.
That's actually something I noticed with the strategy game that
Hmm.
you were one of my first playtesters, of course, and
Yes.
you were having issues with unit identification because they were all circles. And
Yes,
an
there
archer
was.
would come out of left field and be like "sup," and then just delete you, and you're like, "What the heck is this?" So I have had to be a little bit of a borrower when it comes to some
Yes.
assets in the demo, but just having the placeholders there has majorly increased the comprehension of playtesters and them
Hmm.
understanding
Hmm.
what's going on in the environment and why the things are happening the way they were. It's one thing for
Yep.
me to be like, I made the map, I know that's a Pegasus, it can fly over a mountain. And
Hmm.
it's another
Hmm.
thing to see the circle fly over the mountain and be like, what the crap just happened? It's just
Yeah,
killed three of
exactly.
my
If it,
troops.
especially if it was resting on land before, you're just like, okay, cool, that's just a soldier. No, it's come over and it's deleting your units. Exactly.
Yeah. So
Um,
I'm all for,
yeah.
especially if it's something you're not going to produce. If it's
Mm.
sorry, if it's something that you're not going to release.
Mhm.
One of the big things I recommend, and it's something that I failed to do, is
Mhm.
just going back to that position of how would I recommend others to get into the hobby. I recommend you you don't design the biggest game in the world. You
Mhm.
start with building blocks and be like, hey, I just want to know how these two things can collide together really funny.
Yes.
Slap them
Yes.
together, do it, put some silly sprites on there, some silly music, some silly sound effects, mess around with that and be like, huh, that was fun, and then throw it away. And then
Yeah.
build another one.
Exactly.
Like,
It's like a little
like
toy
new,
program rather than anything substantial. Yeah. Yeah.
because those little building blocks are being like, okay, I like even just 3 hours worth of work where you're like, oh wow, I'm gonna try do this and this. It doesn't have to be a product that you have to release to the world. You can be just like slap
Mhm.
slap.
Mhm.
That's kind of funny. I'll take a few videos, put it up on social media. By the way, the majority of people on social media, like on X or Blue Sky
Uh-huh.
or just I think Tumblr as well. If you post your
Mhm.
videos of the cool stuff you're making, people will watch and like and they are a source of encouragement.
Absolutely. Yes.
And when you're slapping these things together, you're building up building blocks to be like, hey, I now know how to get these two fighting characters to punch each other because I did this one thing before. I know for um, I know for the strategy game, I was going
Mhm.
back to some stuff that I had learnt, like in Cintriada's Forge, about grid
Yep.
placements and calling items from grids and querying
Mm.
items and
Mm.
doing hypothetical situations.
Yep.
That the only reason I was able to put the base system in for the strategy game was
Mhm.
because I had done that stuff and messed around and got it done and got it released and went like, oh wow, it's all done. But I also was able to grab that information and move it into the next project. And
Yeah.
when you
Yeah. Yeah.
begin, It's all about learning to step so you can walk, and learning to walk so you can run, and learning to run
Yes.
so you can do weird David Goggins stuff. But yeah, I think one of the big things is just to wrap up my little ramble.
Yes.
Just make small things, throw them to the wind, move on to the next thing. Eventually, you're
Yeah. No,
gonna have to build a product, and this is the next thing that I would recommend. You're gonna have a honeymoon period where you're learning a bunch of stuff, but I think the next big thing is learning how to get a product from the first step to the final step and published. Because I've published 3 games now, and that publishing side is the other dark horse that you're not really thinking about when you're building a game. I need a certificate. I need the certificate signed. I need Google Play to check it out. Google Play is going to come back and say, hey, this is misleading, you need to change the screenshot, or hey, it's not like this, you need to change this. That publishing side is even a good little zone there where you're like, hey, I've never considered this at all. And I know, so if for someone's first game, I would recommend the first game that they're going to release, keep it small,
Yes.
and publish it. I think they're the 2 big ones that kind of frame the entire experience and the experience going forward. Yeah.
Going through the publishing process is yeah, you're right. It is a journey in its own. I have a different experience where I've put my demo onto Steam. They wanted like so many different assets of all different sizes, all different shapes, and I had none of that stuff. I was like, I have a few funny screenshots for the demo page. I'm gonna be good. I was not good. I had I think I spent like almost a week going through all of the stuff that they wanted. And they to their credit, it was very like laid out and organized what I needed to give them. And if I didn't give them exactly what I needed, they'd come up with like an error that says, okay, you this isn't right or whatever. But it completely blindsided me in terms of that part of the process. And you know, as a beginning game dev, I don't think that's anything you need to be worried or scared about. But just to know that it's one thing to make a game and have a running executable, but to put it on a platform is also is another story, basically. But yeah. Just to be aware that whole side of things exists.
Yeah, I think it's a good part to kind of realize, because you know, after doing small little things, I had like the Star Fox game, I had like small little other projects. I was hopping from project to project that was just too big. You don't get the full aspect and the full experience as something as small as Slam Burrower's Climb was. And Slam Burrower's Climb was only as quick as it was because a lot of the assets in that game I just stole from Slam Burrower's itself.
Yeah.
And being able to experience that publishing side, I think, is the next level. And on top of that, it's a chip in your shoulder. It's like, hey, get your phone. You can go here and you can download this game for free, or you can pay, you know, give me 99 cents of fun bucks because come on, I'm your friend, and you can check this out. You know, it was a really really happy moment when I was able to go back and say to everyone at the office, because I had a day job and I was doing it as a hobby, and say, hey, look, it's done. Check it out. I installed it. I think I even installed it on a few company phones because before releasing them, because I was all like, oh, gotta get that spread. But yeah.
Yeah. No, it is cool seeing what you've made out there in the wild for people to interact with. And I mean, you know, unless you have a big social media presence, you're probably not going to get too many people looking at it. But you know, everybody has to start somewhere. So you know, there's absolutely no shame in doing that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think you touched on something that I think is also pretty big. I'm going to be completely honest. One of the big things about Godot to me is it's open source, which means I don't have to pay license fees or anything. I can just release and sell. But more importantly than that, I just thought about it a second ago, and I've lost it. thing. Oh, I'm sorry. It's completely evaded me. Um,
Uh,
uh, yeah, no, it's completely evaded me. I
what,
should have a notepad with me so I can write these things down so I can remember. But
not something to do with, well, in terms of the different engines and their pricing plans and stuff like that?
um, no, it wasn't anything to do with pricing plans. I kind of started walking down that line and I got myself trapped and I was like, oh darn, what was it? So I'm gonna drop it. If it comes back, it comes back.
Yep, yep,
But
okay, okay.
yeah. So I mean, thanks for sitting down. Did you want to do uh, where can people find you? Let's just go with that. Where can
Oh
people find you?
gosh. I have a Twitter account. I have a Tumblr account. It's Entropy Game Dev. If you search it up, I'm pretty sure you'll find it. Um, I can't say my Twitter is that active because there was a point in time where Tumblr could connect to the Twitter API and kind of cross post, but I think
Hmm.
because now the pay for the Twitter API, Tumblr was like, no, we're not going to have that integration anymore. So
Hmm. Hmm.
my Twitter might be a little bit barer than my Tumblr, and Tumblr is kind of an old dinosaur platform
Yeah.
that not a whole lot of people are on, but I kind of like it because it's not
Yeah.
super big. It's kind of small and cozy.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. I have an itch page as well, Entropy Game Dev at itch.io or whatever.
Hmm.
I've got a few of my demos and game jam projects on there.
Hmm.
Um, but Stellar Terminus, which is probably the main thing, and probably the thing I should have mentioned at first, is on Steam. If you just, type in Stellar Terminus into the search bar, you'll find the demo and you can download it and play it.
Yeah. There's a
Um,
demo, so
and
you guys better go out and check it out.
and I have
Um.
updated it a couple of times as well.
Mhm.
So if you see it kind of getting updated, like Steam updating it on your computer, don't be surprised because there's still stuff that I am trying to sort out
Yeah.
as well before the final release. Yeah.
So I'm going to quickly add one thing to the end here.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about it and it's come back into my head. I think the other
Okay.
big thing is if you want to go into this professionally, it's something that I'm guilty of. I think it's something I'm definitely guilty of, which is social presence. You
Yes.
don't, the same with a book, the same with a movie, the same with an album, the same with everything. You may be a bit of an introvert, but you want people to play your product. You want people to listen to your product. You want people to read your product, I think having a social presence and reaching out and building up a following is one of the big things because I've actually noticed it recently where I've got up to about 60 followers on Blue Sky and about 20 on X, but I've noticed as I'm building up on Blue Sky, it's because I've hard fought for that first 50, and that first 50 are continuously liking, which is bringing up me to be seen by others.
Yes.
I think one of the big things is if you want to do this and have your passion project seen to the world, you need to be posting on social media 3 times a week. I think is good. Yeah, 2 of them being, hey, here's some cool content stuff, and then 1 being just like a here's a thing, no screenshot. I think it's
Yes.
pretty
Yes.
good.
Just
But
something funny. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
So sorry to add that on the end. I was like, I just remembered as you were talking about social media, I was like, oh damn,
Yeah.
that's it.
No, I do think it is important. I absolutely do. And look, I think you're going to come back to these topics in future videos. So you're not going to cover anything within the one podcast. So yeah, don't
Yeah.
don't feel bad that we only touched on it. But no, you make a good point that social media presence is important. I'm a massive introvert. Like I can't tell you how shy I am in real life. But that being said, if you kind of look at your um, posts and your accounts, not just to be like, I need people to see me, but
Mhm.
do it for your own personal development. So like
Yeah.
you put stuff out there, you want people to give feedback on it. It's going to make your game better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah,
And you're gonna have those people online that aren't so courteous. I had one not so long ago where I was sitting there like, this guy, oh my gosh, look at this guy. I do the perfect response and oh my gosh. But don't let as much as social media can be a positive thing. Just remember it comes with its negatives, and not to take the negatives to heart. Then everyone's development, everyone's on different points in their journey, and don't. Here's another thing that I've personally found myself falling into the trap for, and I know I shouldn't be talking after you've already gone to the go to my game, go do this, go to that. You're definitely going to you're definitely going to Stellar Terminus on Steam and downloading the demo, guys. But I'm going to keep going.
Go on.
The big oh my gosh, I'm not going to forget this. Don't take the negative to heart, and the other thing is, don't see other people's success as something that you can't. Don't measure yourself up with other people's successes. Measure yourself up with other, with your own progress. You'll see yourself slowly develop if you start comparing it to how you were yesterday, than how someone else is today. That's the other big thing. Anyway,
right.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks for sitting down and having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
I'm sure I'll have you back on. We'll talk about some other stuff as well. I'm hoping to have some other indie game developers on as well, so keep an eye out for that. But thanks for the chat.
Yes, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on, and pleasure talking with you.
All good. All right, bye. It's only after the end of editing all these videos that I've realized I have a horrible stutter. And listening to myself stutter has been so embarrassing. But thank you for making it this far if you have. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the content, please follow, subscribe, like, do all that lovely stuff. Would be more than appreciated to bring you along for the ride. But yeah, thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye.